Hey guys, Christoph the Polish Geek, and welcome to the review of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Because most people already have reviewed this movie, but I am a little late because this movie was released later in Poland, and plus I was celebrating Easter with my family, so there you go. But since I finally seen the movie, I can tell you all what I thought about it. And if I have to be honest, I was kind of disappointed with this movie. I mean, honestly, I didn't really expect much because after the movie came out, I actually heard pretty negative things. Although first I will say, I've never been a particular fan of the Ghostbusters. Like, I know the 80s movie is a classic and it's beloved by many and most moviegoers. But for some reason, this movie never had such a big impact on me like it seems to have most people. Like it seems to have had on most people. I was never particularly big on Ghostbusters. And don't get me started on the 2016 trash. But for some reason, I really enjoyed Ghostbusters Afterlife, and it actually became my favorite Ghostbusters movie. I really like the family dynamic in this movie. I like the setting of Oklahoma, rural Oklahoma, and I also really like how the original characters were very much respected. In the end, something Hollywood has trouble doing, and even though, as I said, I've never been a particular fan of the original movie, I was more than happy for the fans of how the original characters were very much respected, and I really like the overall passing the torch type story. And honestly, I never even thought this movie really needed a sequel. I thought it felt like a perfect passing the torch story, but also the end. But then when I saw a trailer for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, I was actually hooked in because I really like how the new generation will be New York City, and I really like the Frozen theme, especially that I really love anything related to freezing and all. I really love that type of stuff in movies, so because of the trailers, I was actually pretty interested in Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. But as I said and will say it again, I overall was pretty disappointed with the movie. And now, let's talk about it. First, the movie has just simply way too many characters, and by the end, it's just hard to really care about anyone at this point. Like, if the movie maybe focused mostly on the new characters, on the family from Afterlife, and then because the scenes with them were actually most interesting, and then mostly just like had the original Ghostbusters as sort of acting as mentor figures, and that would be more interesting. But no, as I said, this movie has simply just way too many characters, and also it's sometimes really confusing at this point what the plot is and what's the story exactly the movie is trying to tell. Like, the story on a piece of paper seemed pretty simple, and based on the trailers, it's like that the Spangler family now lives again in New York City, where the original Ghostbusters actually were, and original Ghostbusters acting some sort of mentor figures, or at least they should. They don't actually in the movie, but they should. And then a freezing apocalypse happens, and Ghostbusters have to jump in and save the day. We're gonna call Ghostbusters, except that, as I already said, the movie is far more complicated than it ever needed to be, and it just introduced so many characters that at this point, that by the end of the movie, it's just hard to care about anyone at this point. And then the opening sequence that really helps us establish who the main villain will be felt sort of spooky and interesting, but then it quickly ends and it never ever comes back. Like, the main villain is supposed to be very spooky and a dangerous threat, but for some reason he just doesn't really feel like it. He just feels like so generic, and even though on the trailers I thought he might look cool, but in the movie he looked so plain and so boring, like just a lame, like a lame CGI, nothing else. Like, honestly, Gozer from original Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters Afterlife was so much better and even looked so much cooler. Oh my gosh. And then of course there is an action sequence from Manhattan, the one we saw all in the trailers, and this is such a lame action sequence. It actually looked better in the trailer than it looked in the actual movie. Like, the camera constantly switches perspectives and it's actually hard to actually see characters doing anything. Mostly just like... And it totally gives like you an illusion of excitement when there really isn't much of any excitement at all. And another issue with the movie is what they done with Phoebe, the granddaughter of Egon Spengler. Like, she was a really good character in Afterlife, and I really was invested in her arc in Afterlife. Like, she was a great character there, but here they butchered her so much. Like, obviously her character arc is supposed to be a kind of like a rejected genius who, just for being too young, isn't allowed to do what is right, but she doesn't really come off as that. Like, that's obviously what the movie wants you of her as, but instead she comes off as this spoiled brat who isn't really listening to her parents, and as a result she comes off as so unlikable in this movie in contrast to Afterlife, where, as I said, she was a great character. In general, it feels most of the characters from Afterlife and original Ghostbusters, it feels like they have almost no character arc. It feels like their character arc was very much completed in Afterlife, and pretty well, and now the movie clearly has no idea what to do with them, and really this movie exists solely to extend the IP. And then also the only character that actually has a pretty good arc is a ghost character, a ghost of a 16-year-old girl that Phoebe actually befriends, and I have to say, this ghost is really the best part of the movie, and she by far has the best and most interesting character arc in the whole movie. She's really the only saving grace of this movie, but overall, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was such a disappointment, and that basically made me think that, yep, I was right before this movie was announced. Ghostbusters Afterlife was perfect ending and perfect passing the torch, and there never was a need to make even more movies in this franchise. Because at the end of the day, this movie clearly doesn't know what to do with the characters whose arcs are clearly over, and overall, and the main villain is probably the worst villain in all the Ghostbusters movie, the main ones. I'm not even talking about the 2016 trash, but yep, the main villain is probably likely also the worst and most lame Ghostbusters villain ever, and he looks so generic. So, here are my thoughts on the very disappointing Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, but thank you guys for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you later, bye!